The NHL coaching carousel has stopped as Boston and Pittsburgh have hired new coaches, plus an emotional moment with the Masterton Trophy and Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final is tonight. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I'm Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. I'm here every Friday with Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers. Rachel, we are at the Stanley Cup Final already, and the coaching carousel has stopped. We're just like zipping through the end of this season.
I know. It's kind of crazy. There were 8 new coaches hired so far in this short window between the end of the regular season and where we are at the Stanley Cup Final. And it took until the very end to get the black and yellow teams to figure it out. But here we are with Pittsburgh and Boston completing the coaching carousel. It can stop turning for the time being, unless, of course, any of the other teams decide to suddenly fire their coach who were maybe eliminated from the playoffs, I guess. But, for now, it has stopped turning.
It has. And your thoughts, the Boston Bruins, let's start with them. Going with Marco Sturm. He played for the Bruins for a few years. He's coached, in the LA Kings organization. Your thoughts of this hiring?
I think it's really good. I think it's important, at least in my opinion, to get a coach who's been a head coach very recently. I think it's always interesting when you're trying to decide, well, is an assistant coach getting promoted to the head coach role good for this team at this juncture versus somebody who's directly coming from a head coaching job. And so he's coming from the AHL's Ontario Reign, which is a very well-run AHL organization. You look at their success, whether it's, going far in the playoffs or not, it's still a very well-run organization that really does a good job developing players. And I think that's something that Boston needs right now. They're in this huge transition, right? And what better, kind of guy to deal with a team in transition than somebody who has to deal with a team that's always in transition, because you're dealing with new prospects, you're dealing with call-ups. Like, there's a lot of upheaval in the AHL, and Boston is in upheaval. And that's why I think it's a good fit in a lot of ways.
I think you're right. Got to interrupt, though. Some breaking news. Pete DeBoer fired by the Dallas Stars. So the coaching carousel
Listen,
continues.
I did say that. I did say that there was going to be one of these recently eliminated teams that might make a move like that.
You did. Lo and
behold,
voila, the Dallas Stars letting go Pete DeBoer. That announcement just coming as we're recording this show. And here is a coach who got his team to the conference final for 3 years in a row, but couldn't quite get them over the hump.
True.
And, I got to ask you this.
Yeah.
How much of the benching of Ottinger in that last game, how much do you think, if any, that played into this decision?
I think that there was a level of desperation with that move, right? And I feel like when a coach makes a desperation move, you wonder if they're always going to then resort to that moving forward. And I have seen it in the past with some coaches that are kind of on their way out, where the line shuffling that they do or goaltending decisions that they make from game to game like reek of this level of desperation. And when you're in that high profile of a game and everything is on the line, and a guy who has been extremely reliable and maybe just had a little bit of an off period, but to be fair, playing against one of the most high-powered offenses that has ever been assembled, like, do you really like back down off this guy now? And I think that puts a seed in management's head that, like, is this guy going to make rash moves moving forward?
I think there's another aspect to it as well. Did he lose his locker room by doing that to Jake Ottinger? His, clearly one of the best, if not the best players on that team. And the old expression, when you go to the dance, you go with who you brung, right? Well, Jake Ottinger was a major reason, one of the major reasons the Dallas Stars got to the conference final, and to pull him out of that game in I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, but in controversial fashion, he may have lost some players in that locker room as a result of that move.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's entirely possible. I think that it's just one of those things where he's been your guy all season long. Like, why would the team abandon him at that point? I'm understanding that there was a good in-game reason to do it, but I think that's a regular season move. It's not a playoff move.
It's not a game 7 move either.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah.
So, because Pete DeBoer and Rod Brindamore have been on my mind in terms of that potential. So very, very interesting to see that go down.
Now, who do you think they consider to fill this void?
Well, now that all those 8 other jobs have been filled, I think.
Who's left?
Well, I mean, John Tortorella is still out there, I guess.
Yes.
Right?
Wow. And he doesn't want to be part of a rebuild, right?
Nope. Just saying. Oh, Lord.
Yeah, that would be a heck of a match.
It would be. I don't know. I think you kind of have to look, and, we didn't even get to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Not yet. No.
Hiring Dan Muse. I mean, that is a very interesting strategy and an interesting choice. Not, saying it was a good choice. I think that is to be determined, but, is Dallas at the point where they absolutely need a proven winner, right? Or can they be more experimental like Pittsburgh has the luxury of being right now, because they are also in a transition in their franchise history? I think that's the interesting question. I think Dallas is going to feel forced to go longevity coach with a proven track record when maybe that's not what's best for them right now. I don't know.
I mean, if you're the Dallas Stars, do you say, okay, 3 straight years in the conference final, we've peaked. This is what this group can do. We have to break it up a little bit. Or do you say we're this close and we can get this close again and maybe knock the door down next time?
Oh boy, it is going to be fascinating watching this coaching search process again, because they've already filled 8 jobs. So like the pool is definitely smaller, and they may have to go off the beaten path like the Pens did a little bit to find the right person.
Yeah. As far as Muse goes, I mean, certainly a different kind of a hire. He's been an assistant under Peter Laviolette for the last 2 years.
Cities.
What was that?
In multiple cities, he coached with him in the
Rangers, and 3 years in Nashville
with the Preds. Yeah.
So, and he was the head coach of the Chicago Steel of the USHL for a few years, U.S. development team. It's a different kind of resume. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and maybe Peter Laviolette is the guy for Dallas. I don't know.
Wow.
But we will see about that. But, speaking of him, but I think the thing about Dan Muse and what Pittsburgh needs right now is a player development oriented coach. And that's what they got, because they're going to be dealing with a lot of young players and a lot of change. And I think that that's something that is the thing that Dan Muse excels at. And so I think it's a really good, really interesting hire there.
Question in my mind then becomes, like, are you hiring Dan Muse to get you through the rebuild? And then when you start getting better, is he still the guy? Or
I mean, maybe
yeah,
it's what his record is.
correct. Going to be interesting. Going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But new coaches in Boston and Pittsburgh, and a new coaching opening in
Mm-hmm.
Dallas as of right now. So just when you thought the carousel had stopped, it starts moving again.
It always seems to.
Always seems to. Well, we have got more to discuss on today's show. An emotional awarding of the Masterton Trophy. We're going to talk about that and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? In between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, sometimes it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, your investments, and your spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. And when I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food takeout and delivery. And now I can budget smarter and save a lot more on that stuff. And instead of juggling multiple apps, I use Monarch to check my finances and track that spending so I can see where those pain points are. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year.
I don't know too many people who were not moved by the video of Sean Monahan receiving the Masterton Trophy and finding out that he had won the Masterton Trophy, by given the award by Meredith Gaudreau, the widow of Johnny Gaudreau. Just, we are often critical of the NHL for how they do things. This is one I think they really did get right.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely needed a warning before seeing that video, and you have to be in the right frame of mind. So, if you haven't seen it, please watch it. It is just so heartwarming, and like you can just tell that for obvious reasons for both Meredith and for Sean, the emotions are still there. They're still very raw, but that they've developed a relationship over time simply because Sean and Johnny were best friends, that they've known each other for a long time, but have been able to be there for each other in moments of need, and just know Johnny in separate but special ways. And I think that, all of that came through on that video where Meredith, shows up at the Monahan home and with the Masterton Trophy in hand.
Yeah. Just unbelievably moving moment. And it just, if you're not feeling that, like after watching that video, you gotta get yourself checked, just
listen, I just cried the entire time. I was just like, I can't believe this. This is like, this is just so beautiful in so many ways. I'm like almost crying right now. And I know like the Goodro family had a 5K to raise funds for their charity in honor of Johnny and Matthew recently. And there's been like a lot of stuff coming up around it. And, we're approaching kind of the end of the season where we've been honoring them over the course of this full season. And it just feels like such a wonderful kind of button in some ways to put on the experience that all of us as hockey fans and Columbus fans and Calgary fans, and I think, Flyers fans to a large degree, because he's from the area, and like that's where the 5K was and stuff in South Jersey. But I think that there's just been so much emotion and support from around the league this season, and this is just like, if the Masterton had gone any other way, I wouldn't have understood it, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I mean, nothing against the other two finalists
Yeah.
because they were deserving in their own way, but you
Yeah.
can't compare this year,
This year. Yeah.
this year. And I guess that raises the question of how the NHL should handle the Gaudreau family legacy. Do you think
Yeah.
now that we're approaching, what has it been, like 9 months since the
Yeah.
tragedy? The year is going to pass. How does the league, what's the right way for them to handle this going forward?
Yeah, it's just such a delicate thing, and it's so hard because you just want so very much to keep Johnny and Matthew's name alive and going in hockey circles and in the NHL, and just remember their impact. And you think about the NHL awards, right? And they're named after people who made huge impacts to the game. And we have awards named after them for big reasons, right? And we have other ways of honoring people, by retiring numbers, by, like, there's so many ways that sports and hockey in particular can honor people who've, left such an incredible legacy. And in some cases, unfortunately, just like the name, legacy of the Masterton itself, left way too soon.
Yeah.
And I just feel really strongly that there has to be a way to kind of pivot to maintain this legacy and maintain this conversation about these two wonderful hockey players. Um, but it can't ever be the same because time change, grief changes, and time changes
Right.
things. And so, like,
Right.
what do we do moving forward is the question, right?
I mean, I would certainly think that a Goodrow award of some kind would make
Yeah.
sense, but then how would you phrase it? What would you make the Johnny and the Goodrow award? What would you make it?
Well, I think, and to be fair to the listeners, Gil, you and I were talking about this before we started recording, and the conclusion that we came to, I think, is a good one. That it feels like we need an award for it, absolutely, and it should be player driven. It should be a player voted award that is somebody who best embodies the spirit of hockey, that reflects especially Johnny Gaudreau's legacy, but both Johnny and Matthew, in terms of their love for the game, their unbridled joy and passion playing the game, but also, the skill that Johnny brought to the NHL is there as well. So it's kind of this all-encompassing,
And also, I think the community involvement that they always had in youth hockey, in the love of the game, and in giving of their time, and I think all of that should be part of any kind of Gaudreau award, and I think it would be the right thing to do. Now, do you think the league should implement the award? Do you think the Players Association?
I think the Players Association should do it. And I think the Players Associate and have the players vote on it. I think coming from anybody else but the players would ring a little hollow for me. I think that because Johnny Gaudreau is a player's guy, and that's the whole thing about the Masterton of Sean Monahan winning. They were best friends. Monahan literally signed in Columbus to play with Johnny, and then to have to go through that alone, like in Columbus, in a new city, and have to build his relationship with the Columbus community on his own. Like, that must have been such a difficult road for Monahan. And so I feel like only he knows what that was like to go through, and only players know what it's like to be in that league from their perspective. And that's, I really feel strongly that it should be player driven and Players Association.
I agree with you. I think that would be the most appropriate way. The league should sanction it as well, but it should be player driven. And I think, starting next year, it would be the time. And I would hope that Commissioner Bettman would work with the Players Association and the Gaudreau family to create some kind of an award and then hand it out each year in honor of the Gudros.
Yeah. And I think, of course, like, all of this has to be sanctioned and blessed by the Goodro family.
Right.
Like,
Correct.
without question. If they don't want this, let's not do it. Right.
Yeah.
But I think as long as it's something that is of interest to them and feels like it will help them in their healing process, that's great. Then let's go for it. But just want to add that little.
Yeah. No, that's more than fair. More than fair. And and look, congratulations to Sean Monahan for winning the award. And
it's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's always a tough one. But
really
I appreciate his being forthcoming about how much of an honor it is, because all the people that are nominated from all the teams have gone through something to get the nomination, and you never want to wish that upon anybody.
Right.
But to know that he appreciates the recognition of that, and you don't begrudge having suffered what you did in order to get there. I think that's an important aspect of the Masters.
I mean,
as well.
Almost any other year, Landeskog, really? I mean, probably would have walked away with the award.
I know.
But
I know.
Yeah. No, very appropriate. All right. Stanley Cup Final still going on. Only game 2 coming up tonight. We'll talk a little bit more about that next on today's Locked On NHL podcast. So the Oilers win game 1 in overtime. We're ready for game 2 in Edmonton. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it feels like a week ago that game 1 happened at this point. This whole 3-week process to get through if we go full 7 games, it's going to take 2.5 to 3 weeks to get there. That is a whole thing in and of itself. But so we have game 2 upon us this evening. And I guess I say game 1 feels like a week ago, and it does, but I'm also still a little salty about it. I just I don't honestly care who wins the Stanley Cup personally. I think I just want good hockey. That's ultimately. And I just feel I just don't love that puck over the glass penalty having something to do with the outcome of game 1. And I know it's been talked about ad nauseum, but we haven't had a chance to talk about it on the Friday show here. But so I think there is that little bit of saltiness left over. And I do think Florida, from what we know of them and what we've seen from them directly in these playoffs, they are absolutely capable of letting that go and moving on, probably better than I can, to be honest. But I do think that if there's any team that can move on and come back with a really strong performance in game 2, it's Florida. The problem is they're also in Edmonton, who's been pretty successful at home. So
yeah, they have been. Look, the Panthers, this is their 3rd straight year in the Cup Final. They know what it takes to win. They're a veteran team. I think that they can either let it go or use it as a successful motivation tool for game 2. And, this, I believe this series was going 6 or 7 games. I still stand by that belief. I think this is going to be a very long, very good, very tight series, and we're going to see some major momentum shifts over the course of the next 2.5 weeks. So,
yeah, well, and that's part of the problem with so many days in between the games, is that it allows for this kind of reset that maybe wouldn't exist in a kind of every other day series, right?
Yeah, and then I don't get this. I mean, from a scheduling perspective, Friday and Monday, no games Saturday or Sunday at all for the NHL. I know the networks and the arenas all figure into that calculation, but
yeah, there's also the travel day.
Yeah, not a good look in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's really tough when it feels like this isn't going to be a momentum series at all because of that time. It's going to be an individual game by individual game kind of series. And, again, Florida's been here twice. So, but Edmonton was also there last year. So they're kind of used to that at this point, and they know the flow of it. And obviously it went to the 7 games last time around. So both teams like understand where they are in this. And that to me is why I feel like it's slightly less compelling until we get to a potential Stanley Cup game.
Well,
Like that the road there isn't as interesting in the
let
final.
me ask you this. One thing I love about playoff hockey, and I think a lot of people love about playoff hockey, is that by game 3 or 4 of a series, the teams know each other and they tend not to like each other because of little things that happen after a whistle or in a scrum or whatever. Does that get reduced with all this time off in between games?
I think in a different circumstance, yes, I would agree with you. Given that this was the matchup last year, I think it started from game 1.
Okay.
I really do.
Okay.
I think that's where you saw some of that intensity come out in game 1. And when you look at like Leon Draisaitl's game in game 1, like that's a game where a guy like him has to perform like that, right? Yeah. And he did. And I think, scoring twice in that game, including the OT winner, again, despite my problem with the puck over the glass penalty, he did what he had to do, and it was a great goal. So I think, it's a different circumstance because of the repeat opponents than it would be normally.
What do you think the Panthers need to do differently, or what adjustments do you think they have to make to win game 2?
I think that they really just have to play their defensive game a little stronger. And I think that's, there were some little let-ups here and there that kind of led to Edmonton being able to put themselves in a position to win in the overtime. So I think it's just a matter of Florida settling down and playing their game, which as we've seen in the past in these very playoffs, even when they don't have a very good game 1, and I would say they had a solid but not great game 1. I don't think it was bad particularly, but I don't think it was great either. But we saw in that series against the Leafs, man, they did not do well in those first couple of games at all. But here they are in the Stanley Cup Final again. So they're absolutely capable of doing it, and that they just have to do it again.
What were your thoughts about the Oilers goaltending in game 1?
I think, this is a circumstance where the Oilers have been getting much better goaltending in these playoffs than they have in the past. And I feel like the skaters have less they need to overcome, so to speak. I feel like the pressure is a little bit more leveled out between the goaltending and the skaters to get on the board. That being said, I still think because of Florida being who they are, Edmonton still needs to score 4, right? To win the game.
Probably, yeah.
So it's hard to say, really. I think that it helps them, but both teams are so good at this point that it's hard to say that has a true effect. I think it would in like a first round series, but maybe not this final.
It's going to be interesting. You have a prediction for game 2?
I think Edmonton's going to win, and I think it'll be in regulation. Okay. I really do. I just think like they just have like there's something different about this team. Now, like I said, Florida absolutely has the ability to come back and to win these kinds of games. But that being said, it just feels different this year. So I think Edmonton wins game 2.
I think Florida evens it up.
Okay.
And I think we're going 7. I think we are.
I mean, I hope so.
Oh yeah,
that's for sure.
I want to see. I want to see more hockey. I mean, just not ready to go into full off-season mode just yet. But it's going to be a great game tonight, and hopefully a really good series as well. I want to thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You can find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are here at Locked On NHL Monday through Saturday. Rachel, I know you and Erica El Ayala will be doing the Women's Hockey Spotlight on Saturday. Monday, I am back with three of our local hosts talking about some of the biggest stories from around the league. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the final, and thanks for watching and listening to the Locked On NHL podcast.